Namaste to all of you. The talk for today is on spiritual wellness. Wellness, as we know, is a state or quality of being healthy. Now, when we talk about health, we normally consider the body and the mind. Body, of course, through nutritious food, exercises, mind through meditation and various other techniques and methods. But when it comes to the third quotient, the third element, body, mind and soul, we always say we are a composite integrated unit of three, not two, not body and mind. But as we know, the world is concerned primarily about the body and mind and forget about the spiritual. Of course, theoretically, we use the word spiritual a lot, soul and the spirit, but we hardly understand anything about it. Just by reading a few books, we don't understand. And that is why when you ask what is the soul, what is the spirit, many of us are confused. Many of us are confused. So, that is why I picked up this subject of spiritual wellness. To go beyond the body and mind into the spirit and the soul. Now, to go into the spirit and the soul, I think first we will need to know the subject of spiritualism. What is the subject of spiritualism? What does it entail? What does it talk about? Because even in the subject of spiritualism, there is a lot of confusion. How can we become spiritually well when we don't even know what the subject is? Like take any other subject. In science, physics, chemistry, biology, these are all independent subjects with no interference from each other. No interference. And even if we take any other subject, from literature to anything, you will deal with it separately, but not in the case of spiritualism. You mix it with mysticism, mythology, motivational talks. They also consider themselves to be spiritual, that we tell everything about the spiritual aspect. Sorry. The subject of spiritualism does not entertain any motivation. Motivation is through the cognitive mind, through the senses, through the experiencing, through desire. You have a desire for meditation, so you get motivated towards it. So motivational is an effort, and effort is by the mind. That's nothing to do with the spirit. The subject of spirit or the subject of spiritualism primarily talks about the spirit. Primarily. As to what the spirit is all about. And then comes the soul. And after that the mind, and then the body. Body is taken as gross energy, mind as subtle, soul as the core, and spirit as the ultimate. As the ultimate. So the subject of spiritualism, spirit, are merely waves of energy. Waves of energy. It is metaphysics. Physics is to deal with physicality. In the science, physics is considered to be the father of all sciences. Metaphysics is when you go beyond physicality. So science, I would say, is incomplete because it is not in totality. It is now trying to get into the subject of metaphysics by being inspired by spiritualism, by the subject of spiritualism, as to what metaphysics is all about, as to what consciousness is all about. So now most of the scientists are taking this metaphysics, the subject of metaphysics, seriously. When you go beyond mass and matter into consciousness. So spirit is the subject which deals with the spirit and the soul. Both are supposed to be non-dual, absolute, wholesome in totality, eternal, infinite, changeless, spaceless, timeless. It comprises of the whole universe, in which 96% is roughly dark energy and dark matter and dark energy, and just around 4% is matter and consciousness, in which all our planets, from the sun to the minutest subatomic particles and waves, are included. So eventually, even the matter, now science and quantum mechanics theory, the mass that we consider ourselves as gross energy is nothing but waves and particles. Waves turning into particles, as and when we observe. There is an observer required to observe matter, and they constantly keep interchanging, waves and particles. And these particles form your protons, electrons, neutrons, atoms, molecules, and mass. And then this is how we are condensed energy vibrating in different frequencies. Body is functioning, vibrating in a different frequency, mind in different, thoughts in different, and the highest is the soul. Now, why is the soul differentiated, the spirit differentiated from the mind? Even though the spirit is individualized, the spirit is in the mind and the soul is in the mind. Why? So earlier, the subject of spirit was mystical. And that is how the word spirit came about. It comes from the Greek word spiritus, which says as life energy, breath, prana. Breath is the life energy of the body, like consciousness is the life energy of the mind, and awareness is the energy of the soul, meaning the spirit is the essence of the soul. Consciousness is the essence of the mind. Breath is the essence of the body. So we should be more concerned about the essence. Like in the ocean, we have so many things in the ocean, from waves to whatnot. But what is the essence? The water. And any gold ornaments, we will not say it's gold. We will say it's a bracelet or a necklace or a ring or anything else. We will name it with the fancy names which has been given to us, but the essence is gold. So essence is very important. What is the essence? The essence of a totality is the spirit. It is the spirit which is that wakefulness, which is that aliveness, which triggers the mind. Otherwise the mind is mechanical. An operating system sitting in the hard disk called the brain. It has to be like you switch on the computer on and off, it has to be switched on. And what switches it on? The spirit, the conscious principle. Without the conscious principle, the mind cannot function. And that is how the living and the non-living are differentiated. The living has this conscious principle, whether it's plants, animals, humans, insects or ants, they're all aware and conscious. in different intensities. So the moment you add consciousness, it signifies the intensity of the conscious energy. Awareness, intensity, the presence of the intensity of awareness, like in redness, the intensity of the red color, say in a flower. So the suffix is extremely important in the subject of spiritualism. Extremely. Everything is connected to its intensity, its depth, its quality, its essence. Not what the spiritual masters, marketeers, celebrities, artists claim. They claim by adding prefixes in front of their name. Mahatma, Swami, Satchitanand, and I would not like to add more. There are so many that they keep on adding. They prefer prefixes. But in actuality, spiritualism is more concerned with the intensity. How intense is your mind? How intense are your thoughts? How intense is your spirit sitting within you? How intense is your soul? And the soul and the spirit require awakening, because they are non-dual. They do not participate in anything. Their role is not in participation, it is the cognitive mind which participates. So, the subject of spiritualism gives us the knowledge, the ultimate knowledge. Spiritualism speaks about the ultimate, because it speaks about wholesomeness, holistic, total, absolute. Science does not. Science segregates. If a spiritual sees a flower, he will see it in totality, right from its fragrance and to its complete totality in its beauty. Whereas science will rip apart every petal and go into cross-pollination, all sorts of self-pollination to etc., etc. And what is the pollen about? What is the stem? What is the leaf? It will segregate, it will not talk in totality, it will talk in parts. So science is the objective of the subject called spiritualism. Spiritualism is in totality. And it says self-knowledge is the ultimate. Once you have knowledge of the self, it's the end of all knowledge. Why? Why do they say that? It's a very bold statement. It's because of that intensity of this aware energy, this spirit settled inside the soul. It is that beingness, it is that I amness. Through that beingness, it makes the mind aware. The moment the mind becomes aware, only after that it can become conscious, provided it is attentive. If its mind is not attentive, then it goes lower into subconscious level. So awareness is the ultimate beingness from which everything unfolds, from which everything unravels. It's the ultimate knowledge, and that is who you are. You are not the mind and you are not the body. Integrated, yes, but as the essence, you are the aware. You are that aware energy. And in their great sayings, the Hindu sages referred to that as Aham Brahmasmi. I am that aware conscious energy. Tattvam Asi. I am that, you are that ultimate. Why did they say you are that ultimate? Because you are that spirit. You are that spiritual beingness going through a human experience in body and mind. Without that spirit, there is no life, there is no living, there is no uniqueness. Every living creature is unique. from which your individuality emerges. Every single human being is unique from its intensity of aware energy. And their first saying, out of the 4 prominent sayings which they called as Mahavakyas, the first saying is, the insight, the intelligence is Brahman. Brahman is all that exists. Brahman is all that exists. And the highest intensity, the highest ability, the highest aspect of that Brahman is Para Brahman, meaning beyond Brahman, and that is the first Mahavakya. Insight, that clear-sightedness, that intelligence, that unique intelligence within you is Pragnanam Brahman. Then after that follows the soul. I am Atman Brahman. The true self is also Brahman. Is also Brahman. And all that exists, which is because of you, all from the stars to the subatomic particles are also Brahman. And they exist because of you. You are the one who perceives and conceives through your spirit. And you become conscious. So Atman is second. Atman is second. Because Atman is in duality. Spirit is non-dual. Consciousness has to be dual. It has to attach to duality, either hot or cold, either divine or the devil. It cannot, otherwise the mind cannot be, the human mind cannot function. It can only relate to its opposite to function, in order to choose, in order to discriminate, in order to judge, in order to rationalize through its intellect from its memory, from which the subconscious emerges. So this way, self-knowledge goes further into self-awareness. Once you understand self-knowledge, you understand what is aware energy. And once you understand what is aware energy, which now quantum mechanics agrees, aware energy, conscious energy, that is why they refer to as matter and consciousness. Matter and consciousness. Consciousness is a construct of the mind. When it is attentive, after becoming aware from the spirit, it becomes conscious. It becomes focused. It becomes centered. Thinking converges, slows down, and the mind becomes more dynamic. Otherwise, subconsciously, it functions or moves or chatters randomly and recklessly, multitasking, thinking about various things at the same time, because it is in the lower conscious level, unconsciously functioning in a subconscious manner. So, the second part of the subject of spiritualism is self-awareness. First is self-knowledge, then it's self-awareness. Now, once you become self-aware meaning self-aware of your insight, that clear-sightedness as to who you are, more than the cognitive mind, more than what the senses which you perceive externally, you become internally clear. There's clarity of what your inner self is. Your inner self is the soul. And your willness starts from there. It's called self-experiencing. After self-awareness, self-experiencing. Willness starts. Why willness starts from there? Why? Sorry. So, willness is because the mind is functioning. As per neuroscientists, over 98% in a subconscious manner, in a lower conscious manner, it is imbalanced. The foundation of science says 80% the mind is negative. Negative, thinking all negative factors of anger, jealousy, envy, lust, greed, contempt, discrimination, conditioned into its me and mine, selfishly, destroying more than it can create. 98% of the mind is subconscious. That is why spiritual wellness is required. For spiritual wellness, what is required? Soul. Soul is required to check and guide the mind. And how do you check and guide the mind for its wellness? Spiritual wellness, through which other wellnesses come of body and mind. It's only when the soul awakens. When the soul awakens, the mind becomes aware. The soul does not participate, it does not function. It purely witnesses the mind. Purely witnesses. And the moment it witnesses, and it witnesses impartially. Impartially it witnesses. There is no partiality, there is no bias, there is no prejudice. It simply watches, unaffected, uninvolved. And the moment it watches, the mind becomes conscious, the mind becomes shy, because the mind becomes aware first, and then it becomes conscious. Like if I keep staring at somebody, the other person will become conscious. The other person's mind will become conscious. Because first he or she will become aware that somebody is watching me, and whatever that person is doing, that person will become conscious. Likewise, your own mind becomes conscious when the soul watches. The soul is that true self within the mind. In the Western world, it is conscious, subconscious and unconscious. These are the three sections of the mind. But for a spiritualist, it is not that way. It is subconscious, conscious and superconscious. Superconscious is the section where no thoughts prevail, where the soul resides, containing the spirit, which needs to be awakened for spiritual wellness, to counterbalance, to counteract with the imbalances created by the chaotic mind, ceaselessly, incessantly wanting this and that, always wanting one thing after the other, always unhappy, always insecure, in spite of whatever the person may have. Why? Why? In spite of having everything materially, the spiritual quotient is missing. So balancing is very important between the spiritual and the material. It's not that the materials are not required. Material is as much required as much as the spirit, or the spirit. Spiritual is required. In this way, when the soul awakens, the mind becomes extra aware. Otherwise, the mind functions from its past awareness meaning which is stored in the memory, and from that it reasons through its intellect and chooses and discriminates partially. The soul is that non-dual impartial factor. That is why the soul is very much required. And that is what is the meaning of becoming spiritual. What do you mean by spiritual? Spiritual means when you go from the lower consciousness, which is the ego consciousness, into higher consciousness, which is soul consciousness. The witnessing, it is referred to in the East as the witnessing consciousness, that which only witnesses. Sakshi. That is what the soul is about. It is that witnesser sitting within you. And what is the essence? Witness is the essence. And what is the witness? It is that spirit. So witness is the spirit. Witnesser is that self within you, the true self. The thinking self is that illusory self which thinks that I am the eternal, I am the ultimate. Sorry, it is not the ultimate, it's just a bundle of thoughts. And then you have the physical self. So from physical self, thinking self, witnessing self, then what happens? The last is the witness, the spirit, the selflessness where there is no self. That is what who you are. There is no self. Because the body, mind and soul are temporary. They collapse in the vicious cycle of birth and death. Because the soul is one notch less than the spirit, purely because it is individualized. It is individualized. And awareness, the spirit, is not individualized. Soul is that midway between the personal and the transpersonal, because it transmits and receives the universal energy, the universal aware energy. So it's midway, it's a notch less. It is in duality because there is a subject-object relationship. The subject is the universal cosmic energy, the spirit, the awareness. And soul is that witnessing consciousness. There is a subject-object relationship. It is midway. It is in duality. The spirit is not. The spirit is not in duality. So, after self-experiencing, the last stage comes, self-realization. Self-realization is realization that there is no self. There is just a beingness in the form of the spirit, contained in the mind, which, like I said earlier, which unfolds everything. All that you know, all that you know, whether from books, whether from Google, whether from whatever, gurus, motivational speakers, to anything that you know, your knowledge, which is limited, which constantly changing, but what does not change is the ultimate knowledge, and that is changeless, and that is the spirit, and that is who you are. The body, mind and the soul is the quantum of what you are, is the content, not the context. It's the objective, a part of the subject, and the subject in totality is the spirit, from which everything appears and disappears. It is the essence. Like water is the essence, and waves in an ocean appear and disappear. Sky is the essence, on which clouds, birds and raindrops keep falling, as and when the clouds give out the water. So that is how it is. Self-realization. Self-realization is realization of that I amness, I am that art thou, eternal, which never incarnates. So the question of reincarnation is not there. It does not incarnate. The spirit does not incarnate. It is eternal, it is infinite, it is spaceless, it is timeless. Anything contained within a space and time, whether it is the sun, moon, planets or anything, we, earth, we all appear and disappear. It's a matter of time. The sun may take billions of years. We will take, say, 80, 90, 100 or whatever. The time may differ, but we are contained in space and time. So anything contained in space and time, individualized, whether it's the soul, mind or the body, will appear and disappear. But the spirit is universal. It remains. It is changeless. It does not change. It sustains in the nothingness of the universe, the shunyata. In that nothingness, it does not mean that it contains nothing. It does not mean there is absence of anything. Yes, it means that nothingness, that shunyata of the universe, of which 96% is dark energy, of which we know nothing about as yet. And what happens? Everything appears and disappears, like in the sky. The clouds appear and disappear. So many things which appear and disappear, but the cloud is eternal. It's infinite. It's changeless. It's spaceless. It's timeless. It's limitless. It is one without a second. It is the ultimate reality. But science understands relative reality. Spiritual understands ultimate reality, that which does not change, that which is total, that which is absolute, that which is pure, that which is one. One. And that one is nothingness, shunyata, zero. Zero. That is why energy moves in a zero, in a cycle, in a circle. From whirlpool to seasons to planets to everything is moving in a circle. Life and death. Death is a new beginning of a new life. So this is how. Now comes the last part, spirituality. I've told you in spiritual wellness, what is the spirit? What is how to become spiritual? How you transcend from the lower to the higher? How you evolve and how you transform from the devil to the divine into higher consciousness, the subject of spiritualism. Now comes spirituality. Spirituality is very important because that is self-experiencing, that is the application of the knowledge that you have, and that is the function of the mind. Because these are spiritual methods which can only take you to the periphery of the core, but you cannot enter the core. You do not enter the spirit, you do not enter the soul, but it takes you towards higher consciousness. Spiritual methods like japa, meditation, vipassana, zen, tai chi, there are so many, reiki, etc., anything, any method which takes you towards higher consciousness is a spiritual method, and which takes you towards the lower consciousness is the devil. In fact, both are one, because all that exists is not two. Advaita Vedanta is not two. It cannot be two. In the absence of one, the other exists. In the absence of darkness, light persists. In the absence of night, there is day. So in the absence of one, the other. In the absence of happiness, there is sadness. So they are two sides of the same coin, segregated into duality by the mind. And the ultimate reality, they are one, which appear and disappear into that nothingness. So spirituality is a flow, it's a process, like divinity, like humanity. Like humanity. How in humanness, how in humility we become humane. We become humane. It's a process. Divinity, sexuality. It's a flow, it's a process, it's a movement, it's a method, it's an effort of the mind. It's motivational, either towards this or that. This or that. So that is spirituality, from which first you know the subject, then you understand that subject. Understanding is extremely important because in that your intelligence is required and not your intellect. Intellect comes later when it goes into the memory to reason and judge. Intelligence is spontaneous, it is in the now, whereas intellect is in the past, projecting into future. So, understanding, clear-sightedness, insight, and from understanding you come to its application, spirituality, to its application, to its experiencing. That is what life is all about. Life is nothing but experiencing duality, the spiritual and the material, which you are supposed to do both. You are supposed to balance both. Like between the day and the night, you have the dawn and the dusk, where both are existing very close to each other, the dawn and the dusk. So, neither can you become 100% spiritual, nor can you become 100% material. You just have to go closer towards that, as close towards that oneness as you can, because equilibrium cannot be maintained for long. It cannot be. You need to go closer. The more closer you go, more will be the spiritual wellness, which integrates the body and the mind as one composite unit. Thank you very much for listening. Namaste.